Hello and welcome back to the channel. We have a lot of crypto news to talk about, as well as a little bit of an update on the Clarity Act. I'll get to that later in the video. And we also are going to take a look at the price charts. And I want to get started by looking at what's going on with Bitcoin. And this is not great, let's be real. We've got 4 days that it's closed in a row of red. And where we're at right now is about $76,500. We did see it drop down yesterday, just a little bit underneath $76,000, but pushing close to that $75,000 psychological level. And on today's candle, we have that wick that is pretty close to the bottom of what we saw yesterday. So again, right around $76,000, it looks like it's trying to hold. We did have an upsurge in volume yesterday. The volume yesterday was even more than what we saw back on May 15th, but not as much as what we saw on May 14th. So May 14th was a really nice green day, a lot of it moving up. We were not able to break above these very important levels of resistance that we saw, sitting right around $82,800. But it's pretty wild to think about this, that just back on May 14th, just 5 days ago, we saw Bitcoin at over $82,000. And then here we are, we're looking at possibly retesting $75,000. Something else to keep in mind is that we do have the key Fibonacci zone. I mentioned this in my other videos. We now have 2 days of closure below that Fibonacci zone, sitting at about $78,100. So a trend has formed here, suggesting we might see a further decline. If it closed out red today, which right now it looks like it might be on track to doing, then that would form a strong trend, which would mean a little bit more on the macro time that we might see a further drop. Now, I do also want to point out, we can go ahead and zoom out a tad bit. There are moments where we'll see a little bit of a fake out here. So back, for example, on April 22nd, it started to climb, didn't really want to establish itself above that zone. It kept getting rejected, trying to break above it, getting rejected, dropping down. So even though we did have 1, 2, 3 days of closure in the red here, it then decided, hey, I want to try and make a recovery. Let's go ahead and push this. It managed to break above. And then lo and behold, here after we had 1, 2, 3 days of closure in the above the zone, 2 of them were green, 1 in the red, but still above the zone, we then saw a nice rally for the next 3 days. And then we hit that high, it pulled back down, started to make another attempt at trying to break above that, but ended up getting rejected here and pulled back, and then just couldn't really seem to make it. So now we're seeing some selling pressure. People are getting a little bit fearful once again. The Bollinger Band itself, as I mentioned previously, it's still essentially the same width. We're not seeing any big expansions taking place. Potentially, we could see this start to rally as it tries to maybe break above that Fibonacci zone, going towards the median line of the Bollinger Band, sitting around $79,500. But as it is right now, it's looking a little bit more likely that we might be trying to retest around $75,000. So keep that in mind. And let's go ahead and move on to the news. So the Bitcoin Fear and Greed Index is in the fear territory. At one point recently, we were getting right there in the median zone, looking a little bit more casual, but guess what? We're still hanging out in fear. It didn't last very long. And sitting at 25, there's still a lot of room that it could drop down. Hopefully, we don't go in that direction. But again, right now, things are not optimistic, and there are many reasons why, which I want to point out to you, and you need to keep in mind that there is a bigger picture here. And from Whale Insider, ETF clients buy $750,000 worth of XRP, bringing total ETF held net assets to $1.14 billion. XRP and Solana products attracted $67.6 million and $55.1 million in inflows last week as investors rotated into altcoins, even as Bitcoin funds bled $982 million, the largest weekly Bitcoin ETF outflow in months. And RLUSD, which is the stablecoin, just gained a potential pathway into Japan's $4.2 trillion economy under new stablecoin rules starting on June 1st, 2026. So we are just several weeks away from that possibility here. It looks like it's a pretty strong possibility. Okay, up next, BlackRock just deposited $500 million worth of Bitcoin and Ethereum to Coinbase Prime. And when I'm seeing this stuff going over to Coinbase, it definitely makes me a little bit suspicious, wondering what they might be having going on there. But that's $500 million worth right there. The Indian rupee, I mentioned this a little bit yesterday, it's gotten worse. The Indian rupee has hit an all-time low of 0.01034 cents against the USD, or I should say rupee against the USD. You are a millionaire in India if you have just $11,000. That's according to Ash Crypto. So people in India right now are definitely feeling the pain. The US 30-year Treasury yield rises to 5.177%. This is the highest since 2007. And as I mentioned also in my recent videos, we're seeing a lot that's looking like a trend pattern suggestive of being similar to the 2008 housing market crisis. So we are entering a territory where a recession is looking more and more and more likely. A lot of people would argue that we're already there, but here we go. Gemini, inflation outpaced wage growth in April for the first time in 3 years. Inflation is getting really bad. $380 billion wiped out from the US stock market at open. Just red across the board. It's like a very simple coloring book. You got red and dark red. The US bond market is completely melting down right now, this according to Bull Theory. So let's go and take a look at these. You have up first the 30-year Treasury yield just spiked to 5.186%, its highest level since July of 2007. The US 20-year Treasury yield just hit 5.205%, the highest since November of 2023. The US 10-year Treasury yield surged to 4.663%. That's the highest since January of 2025. And the US 2-year Treasury yield jumped to 4.110%, the highest since February of 2025. Mortgages, credit cards, auto loans, and business borrowing costs are all about to get even more expensive. So when we're looking at this, the most noteworthy one is that 30-year Treasury yield. And then the next one, just going back for years wise, would be the 20-year, and then we're essentially right around the same for the 10 and the 2-year Treasury. So we'll keep an eye on this. And the stock market falls to its lowest levels of greed in more than 1 month. As I've mentioned before, the stock market has been massively going up, which is suggestive of a very big bubble, and we should be very cautious on this. And it's very realistic that that bubble might pop soon. So having people going from extreme greed to greed means that we're starting to go towards a neutral fear or extreme fear territory. It's not saying that this can't reverse and go back, but we are starting to head more and more towards neutral. And the White House and Senate GOP target Clarity Act passage before July 4th recess. So we are very hopeful that this is going to pass. It already went through the House. Now it's up to the Senate. There's discussions about lobbying that might be going on. That could be causing some of these hiccups with all of this stuff. And it is what it is, but hopefully that will also change at some point. And right now we are looking at a date of July 4th. If it passes on July 4th, a lot of people will be really happy. We're talking about independence, but it could also get overshadowed just because of the fact that it is July 4th in general. But people want to see fireworks, right? Who knows? They might be timing this to actually have it happen on that day, but hopefully it happens sooner rather than later, because let's be real, the market could use some clarity. We want to make sure that there's regulations that are in place, that people's funds will be okay, or SAFU, right? And everything will move forward in a better direction. Massive crash, $750 billion has been wiped out from silver and gold, and that took place just over 45 minutes. Over in Japan, their 30-year yield jumps to 4.17%, the highest level in history. They just keep breaking their records. Inflation fears are rising. Markets are pricing in hotter inflation, with Kalshi forecasting U.S. inflation could reach 5.1% this year. That matches Bank of America's latest survey, where 40% of fund managers said a second wave of inflation is now the biggest market risk. And also, Ash Crypto pointed out yesterday, nearly $1 billion worth of crude oil shorts were taken 35 minutes before Trump's announcement to call off strikes on Iran. You have at 2:25 p.m. Eastern Time, nearly 10,830 contracts worth of crude oil shorts were taken, which is equivalent to over $1 billion in notional value. And then at 3 p.m., about 35 minutes later, right? Eastern Time, President Trump posted on Truth Social that the U.S. has held off its plan to attack Iran. After this, oil dropped 3% within a few minutes, which means insiders made big profits again. And from Ripple X, XRP is capturing attention worldwide. The XRP community has its reasons. Institutions have theirs. Uphold Inc. President Nancy breaks down both the latest XRP in 1 minute. And it's really nice to see this kind of attention that's going on social media still, drawing a lot of people with their eyes over to what's happening. Tom Lee's BitMine bought $153.66 million worth of Ethereum that now hold a total of $11.32 billion worth of Ethereum. And looking at the price movement for XRP, like Bitcoin, it is not great. You have 4 days of closure in the red. It dropped below that level of support, that support line that we drew just the other day. And lo and behold, here it is. We've got ourselves 1 day that's closed out, another day that looks like it might be closing out, and we have to keep an eye on that Bollinger Band, that support level of around $1.35. And if it drops down below that, I mean, a major retest would be, of course, $1, and then we're looking all the way down here to about 87 cents. So XRP really needs to figure out what it's got going on. That Clarity Act might end up being the bull move. Initially, with it going through the House, people were optimistic, but let's be real, it didn't fully pass. It's just moved from one location to another. It still has to go through the Senate and get signed off as well. So there you go, guys. You can go check out the crypto exchange BTCC. I have a referral link down in the description below if you want to go look at this. There's no VPN or KYC required, up to 250x leverage over 300 crypto futures. It's been around for 13 years. And you can also get a 10% deposit bonus if you deposit over $500. And again, I have my referral link. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Thank you to my Patreon supporters and my YouTube members. God bless. We'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.